welcome everybody to the Game Master Summit and my talk, Crafting Hits, the Blueprint Unveiled, which, let's be honest, is going to be much more tips and advice. So I hope you can learn something from it. Either way, we're going to have a fun conversation about video games, which I'm super passionate about. I hope you are too. So my name's Simon Platt. I am the VP of our Leamington Studio. Here at Kwalee, I'm managing 4 development teams working on new IPs in the hybrid casual space. A little bit about me. I actually used to be a professional wrestler until my back made some very good points about the long-term strategy of this. I'm now pretty much a cripple, which is fantastic. Since retiring from prancing around like an idiot, I've spent over 13 years in the games industry, working across many great franchises, and now at Kwalee, heading up original content on mobile. I've had some phenomenal success at Kwalee, designing, prototyping, and developing many of our hit games such as Tens, Jetpack Jump, and Draw It. Very happy to say, resulting in over 1 billion installs today. Today, I'd like to talk to you all about the approach that we take when evaluating what games to make to optimize for success, the difference between good and great, with some examples of the importance of a great end-of-level flow, and also an FAQ to answer the most common questions that I get from developers and publishers alike. So let's talk about the approach of making hit games. Firstly, and it's crucial, consider your competencies. It's way too easy to get ahead of yourselves, underestimate how difficult breaking into certain genres will be, or simply getting excited about a project and storming ahead blindly. We're in a creative industry, we're in a creative space, and there is a lot of value from people who are enthusiastic about understanding a space, getting passionate about an idea, and then pushing that idea forward through good collaboration and good communication. However, it's also easy to get blinders because of that. So consider questions, for example, do you and your team understand how to balance complex economies? Be honest with yourselves about these questions. If no, probably don't set your sights on idle empire games. As much as you might love them, as much as you might be keen to build them, this may not be the first sensible step on the video game journey for you. Do you have the capacity to deliver high quality assets at a fast enough rate to keep up with high art content demands? Be upfront and honest about what the live ops or just level content of your game is going to need in order for it to be a success for people playing weeks and months and years into the future, and be honest about what that means for the asset requirements for your team. If the answer is no, perhaps hidden object pitches should be ignored. So be honest about what types of games you have the patience, capabilities, and confidence, not only to make, but more importantly, to compete with the other studios in this space succeeding. Brings us to do your research. Now, although platforms like Sensor Tower and Game Refinery are great tools for better understanding the competition, not everybody has access to them. It's also critical that you play the hell out of the competition. I know these days, a lot of research is done by watching YouTube videos. You can find YouTube videos, full playthroughs of every single game that you want on YouTube, but it just doesn't cut it. You need to be breaking down not only how the game operates, but also how it influences your decisions as a player. You need to be thinking deeper about why games have done what they've done and how it's managed to manipulate your interactions and your emotions, the dopamine hits. What's the journey you're being led through, and which punches hit just right for you to keep playing? And lastly, and this has been a staple of Kwalee since I've been here, it's fail fast. I cannot stress enough how important and therapeutic it is to respect your time and the time of your fellow developers enough to say that I'm not interested in working on a game that people do not want to play. Figure out an MVP, figure out a minimum viable product that can answer your burning questions, and ship something with a small budget to test. It's so important to be honest about what needs to be true in these tests for your confidence to hold up. You can't go in blindly and think you can solve every problem. You need to go in with confidence, absolutely. You also need to go in with a sensible plan of doing this should achieve this. If we're far off from that, we should be panicking. We should be concerned. We should be questioning our decisions. The balance is always how much of an uphill battle you have to make the game a success, essentially the KPIs, versus your confidence you can actually achieve it. And you need to be honest with yourself about that confidence and how it evolves over time based on the data you get back. And all of this is in the name of focusing your efforts. So look at games that you're capable of making. So this is competency. This is our team understands this. We feel confident we can make a good one of these. We feel confident we can compete on an artistic level in this space. Overlap that with games that you're excited to develop and ideally become experts in. And this is, it's key. I'm not saying ignore the things that you're passionate about. I'm saying get passionate about the things that you have the potential for success in. And finally, that's going backwards, games that show opportunity for newcomers. So a space where new games are regularly coming along, making a name for themselves. This is an ocean that isn't dominated by one big fish. This is a place that isn't impenetrable, right? And this is where I recommend you hone your craft. This is in no way an assurance of success, but it's a combination of smart plays that optimize your chances of landing a hit. Again, it's all about respecting your time and hedging your bets. And once again, play the hell out of the other games in the space. You need to be able to break down the why behind the decisions made in order to utilize the rationale in your own games. We're not looking to clone other people's games. We are looking to understand how the decisions that people have made have been positive and how some of the decisions have not. Fix those ones and understand how to utilize the good decisions to be able to build something that works for your project. Now, when we were making full-time hyper-casual games, a great hook was a huge part of the battle. You could get sub 5-cent CPI in the US, and we regularly did, simply by designing a compelling 15 seconds of footage and then gamifying it with the intention of monetizing over a couple of. So here's some examples of things that we built very, very quickly, knowing full well that they would do well as far as getting eyeballs, getting click-throughs, getting us that good CPI. Times have changed though. And not only is the hyper business model harder to achieve due to marketing difficulties, there is more success to be made in hybrid, pairing IAP revenue and longer term engagement in meatier, more satisfying experience. And in hybrid, you need to consider the hook, the hold, and the scale. So the hook, what makes them notice? Why we're still playing the CPI game, like we are, and working to keep user acquisition at a price that can justify a lot of testing and quick scale. And that's all about the hook, making sure your game isn't just another one of these, making sure your game can stand out, which is, even if you weren't looking for CPI, is something that you should be priding yourself on and striving to achieve. The hold, so what keeps the players invested? Minigame collections are designed to be throwaway fun. We're looking to craft games that instead gives you a sense of rewarded time investment. How do you make players feel that their time is being translated into rewarding, improving gameplay experiences? And then scale. We want players to come back for weeks and months. This means ensuring that the core gameplay, which should still, like hyper-casual, focus on accessibility and quick sessions, can be elevated and scaled through meta and variation, justifying engagement in the months instead of the weeks. So let's take a look at one of our games, Draw It. So the hook here is strong and it served us very well. A great way to consider your hook is through the lens of the first 5 seconds of an ad for your game. With Draw It, it was the wow factor of an AI guessing your drawings in real time. This was way before the big AI boom, way before ChatGPT. And so it genuinely felt like magic when you drew a circle and it guesses a circle. You add a bit of stick to it, it guesses apple. And every time it guesses wrong, you sit there feeling like, well, it's justifiable though. This does look like a fish, or this does look like a mermaid. It was such a nice little aha moment that was really easy to get over in an ad. The concept, super easy to understand thanks to drawings that are clearly the player, like they're clearly imperfect, and a very simple UI with a strong hierarchy that just tells the player what they need to know at any given. The hold in this game is the nature of the Pictionary style gameplay, which encourages replayability as a way to improve and more efficiently draw enough for the AI to identify. The game becomes about how well you understand the guesser and how much you have to do and how quickly you can get it to the point where it understands what you're trying to draw. And the scale, draw it's a competitive 4-player PvP game. And although you are challenged to progress solo, unlocking skins, additional word packs, you're always looking to come out on top of any given game, charge up the leaderboard, and beat out everybody else. So let's run through a quick example. Let's say I have a small development team. I'm looking to make my first hybrid game. I've got a designer, 2 programmers, and an artist. My focus is on making something simple, easy to prototype, and the priority in the name of failing fast is what we call find the fun. Right? Essentially, my MVT, my minimum viable test, be to build enough to get hands-on with the game and internally review and make sure that it's as fun as it seems to be when we put it down on paper. So we take a look at trending hybrid games right now. We play them as a team. And we end up focusing up on Twisted Tangle. There's something super compelling about this game from only a few seconds of gameplay. It has a great hook. We want to break down this hook into its parts and see which parts of those are going to work for a project that we can work on. So physicality is the big one. You've got dynamic interaction happening in real time. You can see the in-world impact of the player's interaction on the scene. The dragging mechanic supplements this by showing that the player has a lot of freedom in choice, using the world as a sort of sandbox to experiment and explore as they try to unravel these ropes. The game is time-based, a nice, simple way to create a global dial on how high pressure or difficult a level is. And this is a significant lever for testing, trying to craft an experience over multiple levels that takes the player on the most satisfying emotional journey. And this is critical. Finding these dials is important. You'd be naive to think that you're going to be able to balance a puzzle game over 400 levels to a point where players are going to lap it up. Like you need to understand that testing is going to be a big part of this. And if you don't give yourselves good top-level control over important dials that change the way the game feels over time, you're going to struggle to get anywhere near optimal. So when thinking about scalability and games that have the ability for you to keep surprising the player, keep entertaining the player, you also need to be thinking about games where you feel confident that you can identify these levers, identify these areas where you can test around optimal and try and get the most out of your game. Piecemeal victories is another important aspect to this game. As you untie the pieces, they disappear, giving you a binary step towards your goal. This also actually alleviates an obstacle and some noise, making the remaining puzzle easier to pass. So you get this really nice progression as you hit these piecemeal victories. Ultimately leads to a wonderful crescendo as the last few untangles are the easiest and quickest. And then the objective of the whole thing is clear. Like, not only is it very, very easy to understand, but it's clean. It's almost OCD, an OCD way to frame the completion of the level. But as I said, it creates this beautiful flow through the level as clearing aspects makes the puzzle easier to navigate. So we explore different satisfying physical interactions of the real world. We consider scraping wallpaper and paint, tidying up messy drawers, organizing stationery, and we land on Oing Liquid. There's something wonderfully dynamic, but also clean and binary about a liquid being poured into a glass, forming active, characterful waves only to calm and settle to form a clean surface. So that's physicality tick. Add to that the benefit that we know games like Water Sort have done incredibly well and proven the satisfaction of sorting liquids into their unique colors. So we take another look at Twisted Tangle and decide to use their locked grid system. Cups of liquid are going to be on the grid. You're going to be free to drag them around any space on the playfield. Placing a cup next to another will have them pour into each other. So we have a drag mechanic, and we can easily set a timer to challenge the player to solve the puzzle in the allotted time. So when you pour a liquid and either have a full cup of one color or an empty glass, they're removed from the game. This provides piecemeal victories and the clear the board main objective. So it's all coming together, but the big question is it fun? Well, let's find out. So we did build it. We played the hell out of it, and it is definitely fun, but it has problems. So we stack our liquids vertically. This adds a nice element of strategy to the game, as you can only access the topmost color. However, it is harder to see the lower liquids, and certainly how much of it there is, due to the need of a high angle camera looking down on the grid. The logic for the pouring isn't always obvious. We had a lot of trouble with this. When you place a cup central to others, we need to be able to figure out exactly what the player expects to happen, which color to pour from, which cup to which cup. This proved very challenging, as one single rule doesn't account for everything the player may want to do for what is in their head. The second something happens that the player didn't expect, a lot of the illusion is broken, and it becomes very hard to trust in what should be a very chill, satisfying game. And the pouring visual is strong, fun to play with, balancing the time it takes to pour, and these animations out staying there welcome is tough. We wanted to do a lot more with the liquid. We wanted to make it a lot more satisfying when we would have if we'd have taken it forward. But in turn, we were always going to be fighting with the time it takes for this to happen. It's hard to make something that satisfies both the ASMR nature of the liquid pour and then the snappy nature of the puzzles that we're trying to. So ultimately, this game didn't make it. And this rough prototype is all that remains of this concept. We threw around ideas, landed on something we knew would have a good hook, designed a unique and compelling twist on the gameplay mechanics, prototyped it, tested it, identified problems, and decided that the issues outweighed our confidence in solving them. We don't always fail this fast. It can be a struggle, but although I love this concept and I think many of aspects of it has legs, I'm ultimately glad we moved on to new and exciting projects that we truly believe we can turn into hits. So, insight into approach for tackling your first game. The big takeaways are: be honest about your competence, plan around failing fast, and most importantly, be upfront with your concerns and project risks and test against them as soon as possible. Don't be afraid to walk away if the concerns build up to be larger than your confidence in the success of a project. Okay, let's talk the difference between great and good. You may have noticed there is a ton of games on the App Store these days, and there are a lot of good games. There are a few great games. And I want to talk today about one very tiny aspect of that I think too often gets overlooked when trying to craft a great game. A lot of people talk about how the game mechanic's the important thing, building a polished game mechanic that is moorish, and you're absolutely right. It is the place where you're going to build that emotional journey. It's the place where you're going to give the player a sense that what they're doing is worthwhile. But all of it can be so heavily damaged and impacted by a poor or cheap approach to end game flow pacing. So it's a key problem area. It can turn your game from a just one more experience to a now I'm good sort of problematic churner of a game. So something that I always like to do in these, even though it's a little cheap, is use these very rough mockups with Google Slides. I like telling people that they should do this more using faux animations. It's a great way for anyone, artistically skilled or not, to make a point, present an idea, explain an issue, especially when you're talking about flow and pacing or the certain beats you want to hit. It's a really, really nice tool to quickly make sure that a programmer or an artist understands what's in your head as far as the important movements within the screen. So let's take a look at this very simple match 3 game setup. The player slides a tile, makes a match, their goal reduces to 0, new tiles fall in. The UI explains that they've won, we get a screen overlay, we get a breakdown of how we did, and we get our continue. Now on paper, this is all serviceable. It ticks all the boxes for what is required for a player to understand what happened when they made their last match. However, we shouldn't be considering the end flow through this lens. Instead, we should be considering the user's emotional journey through the game and how we can benefit that and how we can best complement that. So I put it to you, in our match 3 game, we want players to start determined and then hit a few loops of thinking, eureka moment, and then happy and satisfied. Thinking, eureka moment, happy and satisfied. And after this, we want there to be a buildup of momentum as they approach the end of the level, culminating in a strong burst of dopamine when the final match is. And during this time, confusion and being underwhelmed are the enemy. This is what leaves players questioning, why am I playing this game in the first place? Is this a waste of my time? And the bar is higher in the industry today. The standards are strong. You should aim to meet them. It comes to UI, UX, and the emotional response that we give to player interactions. So let's take a look at this part of the flow. The player makes their move, the blocks pop, but as the blocks start to refill, the player tries to make another match. So they try and swipe whilst it's refilling. And the game doesn't respond. It can't. Input has been deactivated because it knows the game is over. But the player doesn't. The player swipes, nothing happens. They're confused. They then realize the game's over and react to the win with the sudden realization of, oh, I won. Cool. The end moment didn't build. It certainly didn't crescendo with a feeling of achievement. This was an opportunity for you to get, oh, wait, I can do this. Yes. And you squandered it. And that is so important. That is the thing that leads to churn so easily. And it is, with the right care and thought, it is alleviated. So one improvement here, this is going to be an obvious one to most people, is around visual language of progression. If you want to craft an emotional journey for the player, you also need some confidence that they're taking in the satisfying elements of your game. And you don't want players feeling good because they popped blocks and some blocks popped. That's not the satisfaction. You want them to feel good because they made a decision that steps them towards their goal. They had choices, they had options, but the decisions they made were good and they should feel rewarded for it. So by having the popped blocks spawn icons that quickly move to the goal, you're connecting their actions to progress, and you're also directing their attention periodically to the goal. Keep them aware of how close to the finish line they are, which again seems small. It's so important when you think about that end moment going from, oh, I nearly made it, yes, I've made it, over to being surprised, oh, okay, it's over. It's very hard to get excited to play again when you feel like you're just doing this grind and every now and then it's telling you it's done. And so things like this are important. And then pair this with when these blocks fall in. If the blocks were falling in at the same time that these were going up, then it could be very difficult to track. So getting the fractions of a second down to make sure that everything has its time on screen can be really, really important to helping build that emotional explosion, gets people coming back. And the big one that I'm consistently frustrated by is immediate feedback to player input. Too often in games, I release my finger to complete an action in a game, only for an animation to limp off screen like a three-legged dog, or for an arbitrary pause to detach my work from the rewards on the screen. What I like to do is try and think of the player input as a little explosion that should display immediate knock-ons in the game. It shouldn't be triggering flamboyant, characterful animations that feel like what I did is I sent an instruction into the game that a few seconds later got to them. It should be immediate. I'd consider some subtle positive feedback in this situation as a direct reaction to the block smashing to help set this move as a significant one. Another really good technique, removing or replacing the UI to let the player know they can take their finger off the screen and take in the celebration. They've moved on to another phase of the flow. Getting rid of the core UI, just that moment or that animation that catches your eye and makes you realize, oh, we're in a different place, we're in a different phase, can be very, very useful. And again, just help with the offboarding of a level and make it feel as satisfying as it should. And the feel really is all everything. Like, don't tell them how to feel, make them feel it. This one is tough. It's a lot about pacing, visual storytelling, something that takes a lot of experience and practice to get good at, but it's there and you should work to understand it by analyzing the timing of everything in competitors, especially high polish, casual game and level flows. It is a very, very rewarding activity to record this stuff and go through it frame by frame and try and understand when you get the feel of something good, try and break it down and understand why, because then you will be just consistently making these small little positive decisions in your game, which will make the whole package feel much more worthy of people's time, much more worthy of people's time in the form of ads and also in the form of IAPs and money. Like, I am much more willing to put down money on a game that feels like it has been lovingly crafted and it is not wasting a frame of my time. So these are clearly oversimplified examples, but consider a punch and well-placed fanfare, but do not outstay your welcome. I'm not advocating VFX for VFX's sake. You need to build a reward flow that satisfies the effort that went into getting there. And that's really what it is. I'm putting my time into this. I'm putting my thought into this. I'm working hard to optimize my play. I want then the reward to feel like it is of a scale that justifies that effort. So looking at the results overlay, it's worth mentioning actually all of this is taken from a successful game. The issues I have with the match 3 end level flow, and also the way, I mean, it's a crude interpretation, but still the way that this is represented is one-to-one. So you should consider what is motivating the player to keep playing. Value the player's time and work to cut through any noise to what equates to satisfying and potentially valuable rewards for the player to feel good at. It's all well and good to look here and say, oh, we want people to care about their time to completion. We can give them another leaderboard. Realistically, you could say that about 30 different things. You don't want to be displaying 30 different things. Easy one, use visuals to better represent the rewards. It's an obvious one. Highlighting what really matters and working to make them feel like premium consumer. Put the things up front and center you want the players to actually care about and give them a reason to care about them. A little thing as well, call to action. So the button at the bottom, I always opt for something that benefits the player. So if you can justify claim over continue or next, then I say pressing that button now isn't just about getting me off this screen. It's about banking my hard-earned rewards. And it also gives you the opportunity to show them the next screen, because they'd be stupid not to claim their rewards. There's a fear that they're not going to get it if they don't press that button, which means you get an opportunity to flow them through to the next place and give them a reason to keep playing. Ultimately, don't think of your end flow as a formality to present the player with how they did. Think of it as the epic climax of their journey, designed to have them feeling good as they have the option to leave or play again. Like, this is the moment. So really, this is the emotional reaction you want. I'm on a roll. Let's do another. This is fantastic. So let's take a look at one of the best examples of pacing and UI UX. This is Royal Kingdom. This is in soft launch in the UK. I hope that the GIFs are coming through okay remotely. I know they might be a little bit jank, so I'll share this up afterwards if anyone is interested. But here you can see that the player makes a match. The last dragon egg shatters at the bottom. Dragon moves with a character full curve to the top of the screen. We get a tick of our final objective. We get a black overlay. Logo appears. Celebration ensues. All good. Although this is perfect on paper, some of you may have noticed that I've done some editing here. Again, might be hard to see, but I've thrown half a second delay here, quarter of a second delay in there. And although it still does a good job, the difference between good and great in a game like this is huge. So this is subpar. If we move forward, this is the actual flow. So this is the proper flow. Again, might be hard to tell, but there is not a frame wasted. So I'm tracking the playful and satisfying path of the helicopter to the dragon up to the objectives. I'm instantly aware I completed my objective. By the time my eyes move back to the grid, it's taken over by the logo. And just as I acknowledge the win, I'm rewarded with celebration. It is over so quick, but gives me just enough time to take in everything. It is honed and crafted and polished. And there is a lot of value, especially in a game like this, in getting those frame timings perfect. This not only leaves me wanting more and makes me happy to play on, but it's snappy and satisfying enough. I can watch this hundreds of times without getting frustrated, and I have. It is a masterclass that is worth breaking down. Now, a very, very different example of the struggles that we've had with UI UX and reward flow in our Game Teacher Simulator. It's a really interesting example. It's one we put a lot of time into and felt like idiots at the time, but it was totally worth it. So we went through dozens of iterations on how to message the success and fails in the end flow of this game, because due to the complexity of the design and the source material, it's a dumpster fire of contradicting information. Let me show you what I mean. So this game, in this game, students are coming up to you and they have completed tests and they're bringing them to you to mark. So your job is to either draw a tick or a cross in the box to mark the papers, with the game detecting what you drew and allocating the yes, no. That's our hook. The fact that we have this tech that allows you can just do a very quick tick and you can just be very rough with it. And it does a very good job of understanding what you're doing. So you're playing the game rather than hitting buttons, actually writing directly on their papers. So the student brings you this test. In the original design, if you mark the question incorrectly, so if you were to put the tick down when it was incorrect, mark goes red. Makes sense, right? However, you then end up with red ticks and green crosses, and it became immediately clear this was an instant conflict of messaging, confused the hell out of everybody who saw it. It was not going to work. It makes total sense on paper. You did that wrong, so it goes red. You did that right, so it goes green. But it is crazy, crazy. So we went with what made the most sense in the moment. When you're telling the student they did bad, the X goes red. Red for X. You've said no. Imagine it's a teacher's red pen, X. When you tell the student they did good, the ticks go green. But this created another issue. How can we let you know you did bad as a player? This is essentially a quiz game where you need to be able to tell that you made an incorrect marking. We played around with displaying 1/3 marked incorrectly, but it's too much information on top of too much information, and it was overwhelming. We eventually solved this issue by using block highlights and simple, clear messaging. So the glowing red section didn't have to tell you anything. It made you feel like this area was bad. It was a mistake on your part. We then move on to yet another phase of score messaging. We really wanted to preserve this moment where you hand the paper back to the child and see their reaction to their grade. But here we find another issue. When the kid gets an F and looks sad, is this negative feedback? Did you do something wrong? Will the player feel like they made a mistake, even if they didn't? Well, we made a few smart decisions here to make this work. First, we tutorialized a situation where you get all of your markings right, but the kid gets a bad grade. So you get the messaging, great marking. You understand everything's green, everything's good, you're being praised, but then you also get to see the kid react to what was his justifiable poor. So we teach you that your efforts and success aren't connected to the grade the kid happens to get. We also show you that if you want, you can hand out A+ or Fs to the kids, all you want, to the detriment of your personal game score. Secondly, we remove all UI while this is playing out. The moment is about the kid and taking in, enjoying even his reaction of how he did. Nothing to do with you as an in-game character. Thirdly, and to complement that point, we added the teacher, your hands, to the bottom of the screen, helping remind the player that they have their own presence in this world. And lastly, we realized we needed to separate how the kid is feeling and how you as a player character are feeling. So we introduced another step to the flow. The camera rotates, we get a reaction from your character as the teacher, something you can choose at the start of the game, whether you want to be a male or a female character, leaving the player understanding how they did in the video game. This is pure scoring of how many of their things were marked incorrectly, and it means the teacher can react with anger, they can react with joy, we can confetti and get a more traditional results flow. So a very complicated problem solved with a convoluted but well thought through solution that I'm happy to say has resulted in one of Kwalee's most successful games, sitting at over 100 million installs today. And I genuinely believe that a slip up here, leaving the player confused, unsatisfied in the feedback that we provide, would have led to this game struggling to come close to that number. And what are we for time? Okay, we're going to move on to frequently asked questions. This is one I love to get. It's not really a question, but it's one I love addressing. Indie devs telling me that I don't know what it's like to build prototypes, sub them to a publishing house, and be told that it isn't good enough based on KPIs. Well, newsflash, I know exactly what it's like, because that's what my life, my team has been doing for the last 8 years. So I'm running 4 teams, granted inside Kwalee. I'm ultimately shipping my concepts through Kwalee's publishing house, living with the results of those tests. It's why I always recommend budding game teams publish with Kwalee, because I've essentially been doing it for many, many years, and the expertise in marketing, passionate game makers that make up the management team has resulted in a lot more shots on goal and a hell of a lot of success for me and the talent in our teams. So yeah, it's a struggle, more reason why failing fast and valuing your time to work on games people want is so critical. It was really hard at the beginning, getting failure after failure. We need to accept that most ideas are not going to land, but you push through those ideas, you learn from them so that you can get to the ones that do. Is hyper game development fun? I get this a lot too. I understand why. I get that it isn't most people's dream coming out of university to make small ad heavy games with an expectation for players to play a few minutes here and there and ultimately churn after a week or so. That being said, I do think that people with this opinion rarely look deeper into what hyper casual games development is. And to be clear, this is completely relevant for hybrid casual as well. So the puzzle of designing and developing hyper casual games is an amazing education in crafting accessible, appealing joy. And these are lessons that are valuable throughout the mobile games industry. A focus on the hook is a lesson in mass market attraction. It's hard to be a successful game designer in hyper and not learn a hell of a lot about marketing and how you target audiences. Designing gameplay that adheres to the emotional journey that I talked about earlier, but that gives the player simple, accessible choices, still feel rewarding within a 20-second game loop, is one hell of a challenge, and not something you can just vomit onto a device without care or thought, certainly not successfully. And the big key influencer over the success of hyper games is pure gameplay, which is the most fun thing to work on. It's a high polish, satisfying gameplay, impactful, reactive responses to your input, and solid pacing throughout. So I personally love the challenge, building accessible mass market products that can be prototyped in days, but that also will provide a satisfying, rewarding experience for players for the hour or two of total playtime per person. In hybrid, we get to flex the exact same muscles, but with the added challenge of isolating projects with true scalability, where we can evolve the experience in a meaningful way and keep the player coming back. How much does CPI matter? This is a big one. And although we rarely run CPI only, like ad tests anymore, and by the way, at the height of hyper casual, we were building and shipping upwards of 30 different unique concepts per month in-house. So not really doing much of that anymore, but there are two key factors to be considered when thinking about your user acquisition costs. One, again, it comes down to hedging your bets. The lower your CPI, the stronger your hook, essentially. The easier it's going to be for you to run tests, T-scale, ultimately have the biggest safety net to form how strong your KPIs need to be before you start making some money. And two, it's a hard one with benchmarking against your competitors. It can be difficult to understand what other games in the space are paying for users, but lean on any and all networking connections to get yourself a hint of how they do. As a standard rule, we're looking for CPIs under $2, closer to $1, as we know we can justify enough UA to test at that price. That being said, all about the games, and we will consider anything that looks like it would be worth us getting behind. There's still a hell of a lot of value, especially if you're self-publishing. You need to be careful with budgets, testing more, throwing out games that, even if you think they could be great, bring in a higher CPI. Like there's absolutely a, for the right team, there is a lot of value in the idea of setting KPI targets and working until you hit them. Even if you are killing games that could have success, you need to be honest about your limitation. It's another reason, again, I suggest speaking to Kwalee and take some of that pressure off you. If you just want to see great games. How do you create a team capable of building hit games? So be scrupulous about the attitude of the people that you're hiring. Number one, don't let any ego into your team. Humility is the main thing I look for in staff, as I have seen communication and quality break down simply because one person isn't approachable. People want to avoid that one person. And in turn, I've seen amazingly creative and innovative things come from a team of compromising, creative people who all feel that they have the success that we've seen, the 1 billion installs to our name, we've all achieved thanks to a motivated, enthused, and talented group of people who valued people and opinions just as much as they valued quality. How much does art quality matter? Very tough one. It depends on so many factors. So this was a big one that was thrown around in hypercasual because there were successful hypercasual games which were asset store packed with no attention to detail on lighting and anything like that. There's a curve of value that you get from increasing high quality art in game. There will always be incredible value in a coherent and satisfying style. Aim to ensure that you're creating a game that looks like it was visually thought out, planned, and executed on. Best way to do that, actually think it through, plan it, execute on it. Whether players pick up on it actively or not, it adds a lot of the feeling of quality and value that we were talking about. That being said, you do hit diminishing returns at a point, depending on your audience, their expectations and the taste. I've struggled for the last 10 years finding that line as we've evolved the sorts of games that we want to make, not going over it to save on time and efficiency and not being under it to ensure that we hit a quality bar expected from our audience. The simplest answer is to benchmark on your competitor. Understand who you're competing with in regards to scope, potential audience. Ask yourself if you can realistically compete in that space to a quality that's comparable. Ideally, obviously, best in show. One area that I would always advocate for is UI animations. Modern day hybrid games are trying to compete with casual for UI UX, and so the standard expectations are high. You can still use asset packs. Even the big hybrid publishers use asset packs, but work to make the UI presentation coherent and polished. I am totally out of time. Is Maddie still in here? Maddie, can I finish off the slides? Oh, she's only gone and deserted me. I'm going to keep going until they tell me to stop. Right. What is a fast development cycle? So in the heyday of hyper casual, we were developing and shipping a new game concept in the form of a CPI test every 3 days per team. It was mental. And this is without crunch or crazy working hours. It was fueled by a hardworking team, top to bottom, most importantly, a process and management structure that allowed for rapid development and conversational design. I'm incredibly proud of what we built and how that translated into a 3-day turnaround that has evolved really nicely to our new development cycles in meatier, more ambitious games. Nowadays, we expect to have a first shippable prototype in a few weeks for any given project, followed up with short sprints that are about adding and testing features to consistently build a strong foundation and add more value. Oh, okay, I've got to wrap it up. So I will, beep, 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 beep. That was a little gif of Carol shooting one in the head. You missed out on that. So that's me. Thank you very much for listening.